weren't just fighters, they were the blueprint of what MMA would become. They brawled in cages, rings, and rule sets that barely existed, carving their names into the sport through violence, chaos, and pure will. But after the knockouts, after the wars, after the fame that once seemed unstoppable, each man's life took turns more dramatic than the battles that made them legends. And the biggest shock, the fighter who walked away the quietest ended up carrying the heaviest truth of all. Chuck Liddell didn't simply arrive in the UFC, he detonated onto the scene like a cultural shift the sport didn't yet know it needed. With the mohawk, the icy stare, the tattooed scalp, and a style built for violence, Liddell became the face of MMA's explosion into mainstream America. Long before million-dollar pay-per-views and ESPN coverage, he was the fighter who convinced everyday viewers that cage fighting wasn't a fringe sideshow. It was the future of combat sports. His legendary takedown defense, wild looping hooks, and walk-forward pressure made him the UFC's first true knockout attraction. Every fight felt like it could end instantly, every exchange charged with tension. And when his rivalry with Tito Ortiz ignited, the sport entered a new era. Liddell wasn't just winning, he was electrifying fans who had never watched MMA before. His knockout streak against top contenders, Couture, Babalu, Horn, and Ortiz, built an aura around him that seemed immovable. For a moment, Chuck Liddell felt indestructible, but beneath the roar of packed arenas, a quieter truth lingered. His aggressive style forced him into firefights, trading damage for glory, and each war chipped away at the foundation holding him up. When Rampage Jackson knocked him out in 2007, the shock rippled across the sport. Losses followed: Jardine, Evans, Shogun, each one more brutal than the last. The world watched the Iceman's invincibility melt in real time, and as the lights dimmed on his fighting prime, fans began to wonder, did the sport he helped build evolve too quickly? Or had he simply given too much of himself to keep it alive? Yet the story was far from over, and the battles waiting outside the octagon would reveal a different kind of struggle. Retirement was never simple for Chuck Liddell. The fighter, whose identity revolved around competition, found himself drifting after the UFC urged him to step away for his own safety. The organization gave him an executive role to soften the transition, but it wasn't long before the position dissolved, leaving Liddell without the structure he once relied on. Public appearances and media interviews showed flashes of the old charm, but behind them, a complicated reality brewed. The Iceman struggled with restlessness, financial pressure, and the fading adrenaline that once defined his life. In 2018, long after fans believed his fighting days were done, Liddell shocked the world by returning for a trilogy bout with Tito Ortiz under Golden Boy MMA. But the comeback was heartbreaking. He moved slower, reacted later, and ultimately fell to a knockout that left audiences uneasy. The loss didn't just close a chapter, it forced a reckoning with the physical toll years of striking had demanded. Since then, Liddell has remained in the public eye, making appearances, supporting fighters, dabbling in acting, and navigating personal ups and downs, including a highly publicized divorce and legal disputes. Yet despite everything, Liddell maintains a presence that fans still gravitate toward. He is a symbol of MMA's wild early era, a reminder of a time when fighters brawled first and strategized later. He trains casually, stays involved with gyms, and continues connecting with the sport through coaching and special events. The Iceman may never fully escape the pull of competition, but today he walks a path defined less by knockouts and more by reflection. And while Liddell learned to live in the shadow of a legend, another early champion discovered how to adapt with silent precision. Randy Couture entered MMA as an anomaly, a wrestler in his 30s, competing long past the age most athletes consider retirement. Yet what unfolded next would redefine expectations for an entire generation. Couture's Greco-Roman background allowed him to impose a suffocating, grinding style, controlling opponents against the cage with technical mastery. He earned the nickname Captain America, not just for his clean-cut image, but for his improbable ability to rise to the occasion again and again. He became a three-time UFC heavyweight champion, and a two-time light heavyweight champion, carving out one of the most versatile resumes in MMA history. His rivalry with Chuck Liddell was foundational in building the UFC during its breakthrough years. Couture shocked audiences by defeating the younger, harder-hitting Liddell in their first fight, then later reclaiming momentum in the heavyweight division in one of the sport's most inspiring comebacks. But his greatest shock came at age 43, when he stepped out of retirement to fight Tim Sylvia, a champion 13 years younger and nearly a foot taller. The MMA world braced for a mismatch. Instead, Couture delivered a once-in-a-lifetime performance, dropping Sylvia in the opening seconds and dominating the fight to reclaim the heavyweight belt. It became one of MMA's most iconic moments, proof that technique, intelligence, and discipline can bend the rules of aging. Yet as Couture continued competing, the wars started accumulating. Losses to Brock Lesnar and Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira signaled the fading of an era. Still, he retired with dignity, respect, and a reputation as one of the sport's most strategic, mentally tough pioneers. But what came after fighting would surprise even his biggest fans, because Couture didn't fade away. He evolved. While many fighters struggle with life after retirement, Randy Couture transitioned with near-surgical precision. He stepped directly into Hollywood, becoming a recognizable figure far beyond MMA. His role in the Expendables franchise, alongside icons like Sylvester Stallone and Jason Statham, turned him into a mainstream action star. Dozens of film and TV credits followed, proving that his discipline and presence translated seamlessly from the cage to the camera. Couture also became a respected analyst, gym owner, and coach, guiding younger fighters with the same calm authority he displayed throughout his career. Today, Couture remains in exceptional physical condition, often appearing fitter than athletes decades younger. His commitment to health, training, and longevity makes him a rare example of a fighter who aged with intention rather than resistance. He continues operating Extreme Couture MMA in Las Vegas, a gym that has produced champions, prospects, and some of the sport's most consistent competitors. Beyond athletics, Couture advocates for fighter unionization and improved healthcare, becoming one of the few legends actively working to improve the system for future generations. Despite his tough exterior, Couture has built a balanced personal life, staying grounded, traveling frequently, and staying connected to fans through events and documentaries. He has survived heart issues, personal challenges, and the unpredictability of Hollywood, emerging with a stable, thriving second career. His ability to navigate life after fighting stands in stark contrast to the chaos many of his contemporaries faced. But the next legend built his reputation not on adaptation, but on the pure, violent power of a right hand that could end any fight in an instant. Dan Henderson emerged during an era when MMA was still defining itself, and he instantly became one of the sport's most durable, adaptable warriors. A two-time Olympian in Greco-Roman wrestling, Henderson blended elite grappling with a striking weapon that became legend, the H-bomb, a right hand so destructive it altered careers and highlight reels for decades. Unlike many early fighters, Henderson competed across multiple weight classes without hesitation: welterweight, middleweight, light heavyweight, and even heavyweight, facing every style imaginable. His time in Pride solidified him as one of MMA's great champions. Victories over Wanderlei Silva, Vitor Belfort, Murilo Bustamante, and a monumental knockout of Renzo Gracie elevated him to mythical status. In Pride's final chapters, Henderson achieved something unprecedented. He held two belts simultaneously in different divisions, making him the organization's only dual-division champion. When he transitioned to the UFC, he carried that momentum into new rivalries, including a clash with Anderson Silva and the rematch with Rampage Jackson. But perhaps his most iconic moment came in 2009 at UFC 100, when he delivered one of the most famous knockouts in combat sports history against Michael Bisping, a brutal finishing blow that became an eternal part of MMA's identity. Henderson's style was built on grit, simplicity, and refusal to break. He lacked flashy movement or modern footwork, yet he survived against faster, younger, and more dynamic opponents well into his 40s. Even as age crept in, Henderson never retreated from challenge. Whether in warlike battles with Shogun Rua or grinding fights against elite grapplers, he remained dangerous until the very end. And when the time finally came to leave the cage, Henderson faced a question few fighters answer gracefully. What does life look like without the wars that once defined him? Retirement for Dan Henderson unfolded far differently than many of his peers. Instead of drifting into uncertainty, Henderson stepped into a life built on stability, routine, and quiet leadership. He returned to Temecula, California, where he co-founded Team Quest, a gym that became a cradle for champions and prospects alike. Henderson embraced coaching with the same stoic confidence he displayed as a fighter, becoming a mentor to young athletes, hungry to understand the mindset that carried him through decades of elite competition. While he no longer seeks the adrenaline of fighting, he remains deeply connected to the sport through seminars, commentary roles, and appearances at major events. Financial discipline and long-term planning allowed Henderson to avoid the pitfalls that consumed many MMA pioneers. He expanded into businesses tied to fitness, recovery, and training equipment, all while maintaining a comfortable, private lifestyle. His body carries the marks of years spent in unrelenting battles, lingering aches, surgeries, and the slow toll recognizable to any veteran of the sport. Yet Henderson often appears remarkably healthy for someone who fought at the highest levels for nearly 2 decades. Though he keeps a lower public profile than other legends, his influence is unmistakable. Fighters across generations reference him as a blueprint, the unbreakable warrior who competed cleanly, respectfully, and fearlessly. Henderson has also embraced fatherhood, community involvement, and outdoor activities, enjoying the simple stability that eluded so many fighters after retirement. He no longer seeks headlines or controversy. He prefers peace over spectacle. But where Henderson found peace, the next icon built his entire legacy upon chaos, stepping into every fight as if it were a battlefield without rules. Wanderlei Silva's prime wasn't just dominant, it was terrifying. Nicknamed the Axe Murderer, Silva embodied the violent spirit of Pride FC, a promotion where legends were forged through unrestrained aggression. His shootbox pedigree shaped him into a relentless brawler who marched forward with murderous intent. Hooks, knees, stomps, and soccer kicks all delivered with a fury that overwhelmed even the toughest opponents. During his legendary run in Pride, Silva achieved a level of aura rarely seen in combat sports. He racked up a multi-year undefeated streak, defeated elite fighters like Kazushi Sakuraba, Quinton Rampage Jackson, and Dan Henderson, and held both the Pride Middleweight Championship and the organization's longest active winning streak. Silva's ferocity wasn't theatrical, it was primal. Every fight felt like a street war, a hurricane of violence that left audiences breathless and opponents broken. Fans tuned in not to see strategy or finesse, but to witness the chaos only Silva could unleash. His rivalry with Rampage became an international spectacle, culminating in some of Pride's bloodiest and most unforgettable finishes. But as Pride collapsed and Silva transitioned to the UFC, the years of brutal wars began to catch up. Facing top-level competition like Chuck Liddell, Rich Franklin, Brian Stann, and Chris Lieben, Silva continued producing fireworks, but the damage accumulated. Knockouts became more frequent, durability eroded, and the wild aggression that once defined him turned into a double-edged sword. Still, even in decline, Silva's fights delivered drama. His heart never faded, and his willingness to engage in reckless brawls kept him a fan favorite. But as his career wound down, the chaos he once unleashed inside the ring began following him outside of it, revealing battles no referee could stop. Wanderlei Silva's life after MMA became almost as tumultuous as the wars that built his legend. His exit from the UFC was clouded by controversy, disputes with commissions, missed tests, suspensions, and public feuds with promoters. The axe murderer, who once stood unbreakable in front of thousands, now found himself fighting regulations, legal issues, and the ghosts of a career lived at full throttle. He relocated to the United States, then began splitting time between Brazil and Las Vegas, maintaining a gym while navigating the complexities of retirement. The toll of decades of violent brawls manifested in memory issues, emotional challenges, and physical deterioration, which Silva acknowledged more openly in recent years. Yet Silva's story isn't only struggle. He has embraced fatherhood and proudly supports his son, Thor's rise in MMA, attending events and encouraging the next generation with a softer, more reflective tone. Wanderlei also remains a major figure in nostalgia events, fan expos, documentaries, and tributes celebrating Pride's unforgettable era. Even with setbacks, including a severe 2016 traffic accident, Silva continues to recover, rebuild, and endure, showing the same resilience that defined his fighting prime. His relationship with fans remains strong. He is greeted with respect and reverence wherever he appears, and despite the chaos that surrounds his post-fighting years, Silva has found moments of peace, purpose, and stability. But while Silva's journey bent between glory and turmoil, the final fighter's path moved in silence, building one of the greatest legacies the sport has ever seen without ever needing to raise his voice. Fedor Emelianenko didn't just dominate MMA, he redefined what dominance looked like. In an era of wild brawls, uneven matchmaking, and evolving rules, Fedor brought something entirely different: discipline, calm, and technical violence wrapped inside an emotionless facade. His stoic demeanor became iconic. No theatrics, no trash talk, no bravado, just a small, unassuming heavyweight who dismantled giants. His run in Pride was the stuff of legend, defeating Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, Mirko Cro Cop, Mark Coleman, Kevin Randleman, Tim Sylvia, and Andrei Arlovski. Each name was a cornerstone of the heavyweight division, each man carrying their own mythology, and each one fell to the same soft-spoken Russian from Stary Oskol. What made Fedor terrifying wasn't just his power or submissions, it was the way he moved. His footwork felt effortless, his transitions instantaneous, his ground and pound precise and merciless. He fought with the composure of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a predator. Nothing seemed to shake him. Even when slammed on his neck by Randleman in one of MMA's most famous moments, Fedor reversed the position seconds later, as if the laws of physics bent in his favor. Fans didn't watch him hoping for victory. They watched him expecting inevitability. But the myth eventually met reality. After Pride's collapse, Fedor entered a new era of opponents and organizations. His losses in Strikeforce to Werdum, Bigfoot Silva, and Dan Henderson shocked the world and fractured his aura of invincibility. The unbeatable Titan suddenly appeared human. Still, Fedor continued to compete, driven not by fame but by loyalty to the sport and to himself. Comeback wins, Bellator runs, and emotional rematches kept his legacy alive. And when he finally stepped away from competition, he left behind a career still widely regarded as the greatest heavyweight run in MMA history. But the man who once stood above the sport now entered a new chapter, one shaped not by violence, but by quiet influence and an unexpected shift in his public identity. Fedor's life after retirement became a reflection of the qualities he carried throughout his career: privacy, discipline, and an unwavering devotion to routine. Rather than chasing Hollywood roles, business ventures, or flashy commentary jobs, the last emperor returned to his home in Stary Oskol and slipped comfortably into roles that suited him best: mentor, coach, and statesman of Russian MMA. He began training fighters, guiding prospects, and shaping the next generation of competitors with the same calm precision that once made him unbeatable. His presence in Russian combat sports grew larger than ever, not as a fighter, but as an authority figure. He also accepted positions within Russia's athletic and political systems, becoming a key figure in national MMA federations, sports administration, and cultural outreach. His influence became formal: meetings with government officials, public appearances at military academies, involvement in athletic reform. roles far removed from the cage but aligned with his disciplined, reserved nature. Yet this transition wasn't without controversy. Fedor's political associations and ties to state institutions complicated his global reputation. Some fans struggled to reconcile the silent icon with the realities of geopolitical tension. Still, for many, Fedor remained a symbol of purity in a sport known for chaos. Physically, he remains in impressive condition for a retired heavyweight, maintaining training habits and frequently appearing at Bellator events as an ambassador. Emotionally, he speaks seldom but thoughtfully, showing respect for the fighters of today while rarely placing himself above them. His legacy is sealed, yet Fedor himself never treats it as such. He talks of the sport with humility, of his career with detachment, and of his influence with unexpected modesty. His life now is one of structure and simplicity, far from the roars of Japanese arenas or the bright lights of American promotions. No scandals, no spectacle, just quiet purpose. And perhaps that is the final twist in Fedor's story. The greatest heavyweight of all time didn't need to chase the spotlight after his final fight. He simply walked away, leaving a shadow so large that the sport still hasn't quite filled it.